everybody. Artistry and Finesse with you. It is Wednesday, June 25th, 2014. Finesse, how will this day go down in Penguins history?
I just don't think we're going to know for like 9 months, at least.
I'm asking you to predict.
I think it will go down as a day that has less meaning than the day we're going to see in a week with the draft and free agency. I think that I've really been trying to get my head around how I feel about all this and like the firing of Shiro and what seems like a little bit of bumbling from Jim Rutherford, although he hasn't actually really done much yet.
A little bit of bumbling?
Well, there's a fair amount of bumbling, but
it's pretty much been straight bumbling out of the gate.
But what's weird is that, and I acknowledge this is a contradiction, the Pens needed a new coach. But at the same time, I think it's fair to say that if the Pens had like three upgrades at like maybe only two or three players were upgraded in the playoffs, they would have been in the Stanley Cup Finals. So I just don't know that the coaching hire is going to be the difference, because with the coach that I think should have been fired, they were a couple players away from being in the finals, and with the new coach, they're probably a couple players away from being in the finals.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Mike Johnston could be a great coach. He could be a mediocre coach. He could be a bad coach. But it's worth keeping this in perspective. This is a hockey team in the last 30 years that has had guys like Pierre Kramer, Gene Ubriaco. You know, at one point, Eddie Johnston just came down to coach because there was nobody else to coach.
I think Ivan Holenka got fired after like three games.
Craig Patrick at one point was like, I think I'll just coach now.
Eddie Olczyk.
There were many years where the coach was almost besides the point. And I think the game has changed. It's, coaching has become, whether it's really more important or not, everybody seems to think it's more important. Players are probably overcoached now, but there have been many years in the Penguins' recent history where it hasn't mattered one whit who the coach was. It's about personnel. Right,
and as we try to sit here and put on a podcast, like, I don't know anything about Mike Johnston, who all I know is I'm going to just start calling him the Johnst. I think that's the nickname, the Johnst. And I don't know anything about him. And you can read stuff about him, but every time I start reading about him, I think about it this way. We read a lot of stuff that people write about the Penguins, and the Penguins are like a premier organization in the league. And a lot of the stuff we read about the Penguins just seems wrong or just off, or like people are seeing things that we're not seeing. So now I think about the people who are covering the Portland Winterhawks. And when I see them write about like some system that they're playing in Portland, or how this guy turned the team around there, I just don't put a lot of stock into it. I just have to see it myself.
I think that's exactly right. It's all equally ridiculous to me, whether somebody says they're sold on Mike Johnston because he plays like a fast break system, or whether they say he can never succeed because he's a junior A coach. Listen, we've seen some coaches in the NHL that had some modicum of success despite obviously having no idea whatsoever what they were doing. So I think both ends of the spectrum are equally silly, in that you're right. Like, the proof is in the pudding. You got to let the guy do his thing and see what happens.
Yeah, and like none of us knew Bilesma when the Pens promoted him to coach.
Yeah.
And then within like 3 years he's coaching the Olympic team. So
right.
You just don't know. And the players have more effect than anything. And on that front, the spotlight comes back to Jim Rutherford, who is, the most important figure in this offseason, despite his attempt to delegate his importance among like a dozen different assistant general managers. What is your impression of his reign so far?
Well, say what you will about what Ray Shiro did with this team's roster. I think that it's totally fair to criticize him for any number of moves, and we have, and I think we're on the record time and again as saying he should have been and was rightly held accountable for mistakes that he made. But what's undeniable, and which has been brought into stark relief in this Rutherford regime, is that what Ray Shero did over the last 5 years is he gave the Penguins a certain mystique. The Penguins were always at the forefront of any discussion about targeted destinations, by free agents or by people that wanted to trade. Pittsburgh was always at the top of people's list, and Pittsburgh was always in the mix for the to make the big splash move. And we had consistent success, even though you can second guess a number of moves he made. He engineered a winning culture, and there was a mystique surrounding the team, and that's now gone. Ever since Jim Rutherford took over, it's like pulling back the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, and you see like this 65-year-old guy who's, barely paying attention. It's like he's sitting at a desk in his slippers or something. That's what you picture. And he's just talking to the media and saying the first thing that comes into his mind. And I don't think he said anything since he was hired that gives me any confidence in what he's doing. He hasn't actually done much yet, so I guess the jury's still out in that regard. But I can say that the mystique is now gone, and the sort of aura of the Penguins being one of the top organizations in the league is gone.
Yeah, that's probably fair to say. Although I don't know that mystique necessarily, guarantees any sort of result. You just have to be good at picking players. It's like such a, and that's why I just think like there's been a lot of focus this offseason on the management, and like David Morehouse is reshuffling people's duties and redrawing the organizational chart and who reports to who and all this different type of stuff. And, how many assistant GMs does a guy need? And you got this one analytics guy, but we got another, all this stuff. And the focus, though, it has to be on the on-ice product. Like, it just has to, it's really simple. It's like we have X dollars to spend. We need, and we need to, we're going to sign a fourth-line guy for $1.1 million. It has to be a better player than Tanner Glass. Like, that's it. I mean,
listen, you and I agree, but the problem for me to this point is this guy thinks it's 1985. He really does, because we don't need to know how the sausage is made. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with you. I feel like I wanted a GM to come in and not tell me anything about what's going on behind the curtain. Just to tell me that he's going to get the job done, he's going to make the changes that need to be made, he's going to hire the coach that needs to be hired. But we're getting total transparency in a way that's not flattering. And it's the only thing that anybody has to talk about right now is, the shuffling of the assistant GMs and, his ruminations about who his first, second, and third choice as the coach are. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're right. We should be focused on the roster. That's what he should be focused on. Or at the very least, everyone should be made to think that's what he's focused on. But the fact that he's spending all this time, moving around the furniture, it just really undermines everyone's confidence.
Right. No, I think that's a fair point. But what he has going for him is that he hasn't actually had to do anything yet, other than hire the coach. So it's like a guy getting prepared for his job interview by taking like 20 showers and like putting on all kinds of stuff, a bunch of different outfits and trying on 8 different ties. Once he gets in the room, though, that's when we'll see what happens. But one of the risks of all the machinations about management restructuring, besides just sort of like the general turnoff of like what I sense is like David Morehouse and company thinking that like they're responsible for the winning on the ice, which is just sort of like annoying. But I think that part of it is that you let opportunities slide, like go away, and the Pens have some really attractive unrestricted free agents who the Pens probably aren't going to sign, and so like, if the GMs focus on the right thing, it's like, all right, we're how far apart are we from Brooks Orpik and Matt Niskanen and Jussi Jokinen, and all, if we're not going to resign them, then let's move them, even if we just get a 5th or 6th round pick. And there's still time to do that, but you just haven't got much indication that that's coming.
No, and you get the sense that anything that Rutherford does along those lines is something that's sort of going to land in his lap, like somebody calling and saying, "We'll give you a third for the rights to talk to Niskanen," or whatever. That's in play. It could very well happen, but the guy, there's been no indication that he's focused on the roster at all. And maybe he is, or maybe he's delegated that to Tom Fitzgerald or whatever.
But how much delegating? Like, this is let's talk about this, because we talk about this offline all the time. How many assistants do you need as a general manager?
We could do this pretty much in a day.
If this is your full-time job, now I get that you need a bunch of scouts, and there's all these leagues all over the world, and you need people out there doing that kind of stuff. I understand all that, but like, how many actual people need to be in the room deciding on players? And like, isn't there sort of a, aren't you better off just have like one or two guys who have good judgment rather than like a team of people, and you're delegating certain responsibilities, and X guy makes the first call to the agent, and who's on the call when the agent calls back, and all this stuff.
Yeah, it shouldn't be like a cabinet meeting.
No, you're picking like 20 guys to play hockey, and you already have like 13 of them. So you have to find like 7 people to come and play hockey, and this is what you do all day.
Yeah,
all year long, you just watch hockey games.
There could be some overthinking going on. There's no question about that.
Like, it's just, I know there's a business element to it, but it's just not. I just don't see the hockey operation, like the picking of players to come to training camp, to require such delegation and administrative shuffling.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, like, you want your advanced statistics guy, like you want somebody doing the analytics. I could see that being a job. But aside from that, like, I don't know why you would need so many people. It's surprising to me that a sophisticated businessman like Ron Burkle would have any patience for this whatsoever. Because, if he's really that smart and he knows anything about hockey, he'd probably just say, what the hell's the big deal? Just, like, make some decisions. Why are you ruminating about this with, like, 12 assistants?
But we have, like, general managers who are in charge of the salary cap. And there's, like, 3. And then there's, like, the liaison with the players. And then there's, like, the development people. It's like, I don't know. Just pick a player and tell him to go to practice.
All right, let's do Jim Rutherford's job for him right now. What are we doing? I mean, we've been talking on and offline for the last couple days about our feeling at this point, especially what we've seen so far in the off season. Just saw this dude for Edmonton sign. Never even heard of this guy. 2 years, $9 million. Nikita Nuleman or something. I don't know who the hell that is. James Neal makes $5 million a year. He's 26 years old. He's one of the most prolific scoring wingers in the league. And we're talking about trading him, which doesn't strike us as the best idea in the world.
No, I think it's a really bad idea. I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is, like, is James Neal a guy you want on your team? And there have been occasions and moments where you're like, what is wrong with this guy? Why does he keep taking offensive zone penalties? Why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? But on the other side, like, what would your level of surprise be on a scale of 1 to 10 if something clicked with Neil and he went back to like that guy who was the 2012 version of Neil before that Flyers series? I'd be totally unsurprised if that happened. He's like 26.
Now that he's got the professorial and paternal Mike Johnston in his corner that can, coach him up a little bit, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, he's still a young player. He's got a great contract. And even with all the baggage you've been getting with him the last couple of years, he's still a player you'd want on your team. Like, he's still really good. You just don't find guys like that who can bury the puck from a distance like he can. And there are other things to his game that I think he needs to change and then get back to sort of like a little bit more of a pest mentality while staying clean, as opposed to just sort of like thinking he's a superstar and retaliating.
I just show that guy video of Marian Hossa and be like, this is your goal.
Yeah, that's a guy you want on your team. I don't know, unless you're getting, here's the problem. If you trade him for like Evander Kane, which is, I don't think it is, I wouldn't do that if I was Winnipeg, but whatever. Let's say you do that, then okay, you made a parallel move and like, all right, fine. I don't know what the point was of trading him, but okay, you got the same player. But if you trade him for multiple guys, then you have like legitimately no top 6 wingers except for Chris Kunitz.
That's true. Kane is the one move that I would make. I don't think that Winnipeg, if they were smart, would do straight up Neil for Kane. I think they're different players. I think Neil is a more gifted goal scorer, has a better shot, but Kane is 4 years younger and really tough and nasty.
I would do that. I would do that trade, but I just don't. I mean, how many teams are going to try to be trading for Evander Kane? Probably everybody.
Yeah, probably everybody, but not many other teams have a top line winger they can send back that has a really nice cap hit and is 26 years old. So that's not something that I would ignore if I were Winnipeg. That's for sure. I'd ask for another piece,
But I guess the point is that Neil is not, like, trading Neil is not addition by subtraction. Like, that's a guy who, if you have on your team, you don't give up unless you're clearly getting something better. Because he can still improve. Like, he's a value now, but he can be better next year and the year after. He's only 26,
We agree. The guy to trade, Chris Kunitz, is going to be 35 years old in September. He's got 3 years left on his deal at a not insignificant cap hit of $3.875 a year. Chris Kunitz could fall off a cliff at any moment. He's 35 years old. He plays a physical game. You got to sell high, or at least you got to try. People come back and they say, "Oh, he means more to the Penguins than anybody else," and he's a Crosby guy, whatever. All of that is illusory as far as I'm concerned when you're dealing with somebody who's 35 years old. If he was 30, I would think differently about it. But I think he's a guy you move now to get younger players who can make your lineup a little bit more balanced.
What do you think you could get for him?
At the very least for Kunitz, I would expect a really good third-line player and another piece. Maybe it's another forward prospect. I think it's too much to ask to get 2 NHL forwards in exchange for Kunitz because, there's going to be a little bit of a discount because, wherever he's going, he's not going to be playing with Crosby, but I think that's overrated because he's shown that he's going to play well with any elite players. He did it in Anaheim, he did it on Malkin's line, and now he's doing it with Sid. So it's not like he's a Sid-only guy. You can stick him on any top line if you've got a couple other good players to play with him.
Here's to anyone who thinks that you don't trade Kunitz because he's still a very productive player, which I agree with. He's a very productive player. He is as old now. I think he's actually older now than Brendan Morrow was when he came to the Penguins a season and a half ago.
Yeah.
Like he could, like you said, he could just fall apart
at any moment.
So I think that the fact that he's a productive player, you want to look to sell high on that guy.
That's exactly right.
And he has a certain comfort level with Crosby, but I would say that maybe Crosby needs to be taken out of his comfort zone a little bit. And I don't think it would be the worst thing to give Crosby some different people to play with than he's done over the last few years.
Agree 100%. Let's just play this out for a second. You're going to keep Kunitz for another year? What happens when he's 36? You're going to keep him for 2? What happens when he's 37? You're going to have him on 6? I mean, at some point, you're going to have really diminishing returns on Chris Kunitz. Now is absolutely the time to do this.
And no one loves Chris Kunitz more than we do.
We love Chris Kunitz. It's just common sense.
Right.
You gotta fill out your roster. Rutherford's saying he's going to upgrade the third and fourth lines. How are you going to do that, Jim? I don't see any UFAs that are going to be such a huge upgrade on the third and fourth lines. You're going to have to make a trade or two.
Yeah, you got to give something to get something.
You sure do.
I think the only way that we can really pull the trigger on this is we need to hire like 12 assistant bloggers and have them identify some people we could trade Chris Kunitz for. I
thought it was hilarious today. There was the tweet about Jim Rutherford's having Botterill call players and their agents to signal our interest. And there were a couple responses saying, well, Shiro did that for years with Botterill. Yeah, but you never heard about it, did you? You never heard? Shiro never went to the meeting and was like, yeah, I'm having Jason do all my work for me. You never heard a word from Shiro about that. And that is the point, everybody. That is the point. Right.
So what about the other guy that gets tossed into trades all the time is Letang. Unfortunately, I think we may be just having to face the reality that the Pens missed their opportunity to trade Letang, and now you just have to keep him. Because in my mind, possibly the most underrated story of the offseason and what might prove long-term to be the most important, and I mean this in a bad way, is that Bennett, Mata, and Pouliot all are having surgery or had surgery, and at a time when their development is absolutely crucial to the Pens' success. And I think if you lose Niskanen, Orpik, and you have Mata coming off surgery and Pouliot coming off surgery, plus he's never played in an NHL game before, it's just really hard to give up Letang.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think that the marriage of Johnston and the Penguins is owed in part of Letang. If what we're hearing about Johnston is accurate, that he loves to push the pace and he loves to get the defenseman involved in the play, I'm sure Letang's presence was a big asset in his mind, and I'm sure that's something that is very much in the Penguins' plans to sort of focus the new look offense around his skills.
Yeah,
I think that's appropriate. I mean, this is the kind of game he wants to play. Chris Letang is a great tool for that.
And we've been saying for a while that Letang needs a different coach, or at least I don't know if another coach is going to be better. He might just be the player that he is, who's kind of mistake prone, but. There's definitely a possibility that a different regime could, I don't know if it's hold him accountable. I hate when people say that. I don't know what that even means. When you yell at him on the bench. I mean, but sort of get him to play a style that doesn't hurt his team as much as it has in the past at times.
Yeah.
So, I think, and all of a sudden the defense looks relatively thin because, one of the guys who's left is Scuderi, and he's not really good anymore. So I don't know what you have if you move Letang. And I wish we would have traded. I mean, we should have traded him last offseason, but that's that ship has sailed.
Yeah, I mean, I would never rule it out just because if somebody blew me away with an offer, I think we would probably want to take it. With Pouliot on the horizon here, and I think Pouliot's going to be a good player. But,
yeah, so do I. It's just like you can't really count on him next year to like, is he going to be better than Oli Mata was this past season?
Yeah, probably not.
And then, is that going to be good enough in the playoffs? Like to have two Oli Matas as your second and third best defenseman?
You and I were talking today online about whether we would do the Stahl trade in reverse at this point. Send Pouliot, Sutter, and Dumoulin to Carolina for Stahl. And this was prompted by the observation that Jordan Stahl is still only 25 years old.
I know, it's amazing. He's going to end up playing like the most games in NHL history, I bet. If he can get on a playoff contending team and that goes 2-3 rounds deep every year, I could easily see him all of a sudden he's 33 years old and he's played like 2,800 NHL games or something. That's a really interesting question because the narrative on that trade was like, oh, the Pens won it initially, and then Stahl sort of hasn't become the player that Stahl thought he would be in Carolina, while at the same time, like Sutter hasn't become the player that people thought he was coming here. And I don't know what the Penguins are doing with Dumoulin. He's just like going to just age in Wilkes-Barre, I guess. So like the trade has sort of become underwhelming. But now when you think about it, it's like I think I would do it in reverse. I mean, I think my feelings on Sutter are well known. I don't think Dumoulin really appears to be in the Pens' plans. So it's like, would you trade Pouliot for Sutter or for Stahl? Yeah, I don't see how you. I mean, I would. It's too much of an uncertainty with Pouliot. Whereas with Stahl, like the thing about Stahl is that, and this we said this online today to each other, is like if he just embraces what he should be, which is a third-line center. And there's no reason for him not to embrace it because he's already got his contract. He signed for like another 8 years, so his stats aren't going to earn him any more money. If he were to embrace that role, he would be the best third-line center in the league for the next 8 years.
That's it. He's just a beast. And it's not just – I mean, just call him a third-line center is not doing it justice. I mean, he's sort of a hybrid player. He plays in the top six at opportune times, but also can center his own line. He's sort of an all-purpose guy. He's going to play 20 minutes at least every night.
Yeah,
he's going to play as much as anybody on the team.
The value of having a player, a center who could play like 22 minutes a night behind Crosby and Malkin is just like, I mean, yeah, so yes, I would do that in reverse. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would do it.
In a heartbeat.
Let's just go through real quick the Pens' other unrestricted free agents and what you would do with them, and then we can maybe look around the league.
I don't think this is going to be hard. Go ahead.
UC Jokinen.
Gone.
Would you even try to keep him at all?
No, because he's going to demand at least $3 million a year. I'm not interested.
Well, $3 million a year I might do, because I don't.
I wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't do?
I would not do it. No,
see, I would. The guy had a good year last year. I don't think $3 million is what it was a couple years ago. $3 million is a new $2 million.
It's not that he's not a useful, like, handy guy to have around. He's fine, but the question we have to ask ourselves is, what does he add to the core of Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and Neal?
Well, he could be third line. I mean, the third line on a good team would be someone other than Sutter playing with Dupuis and Jokinen.
I get he's not the guy I want. He's not the guy that we need. We need somebody that's gonna, not. I just feel like he's so bland. He's so vanilla.
The whole it's so funny you say that because I wrote in my notes. I was writing about what Brandon Sutter as a player, And this is, I'm like reading. You just said vanilla. I said he's so vanilla. It's like taking a piece of white bread, soaking it in a glass of whole milk, sprinkling powdered sugar on it, and feeding it to a 3-legged kid. That's like the edge that some of the guys in the Pens play with.
Yes, I mean, it's not. It's got to be like the most uninteresting 20 goals ever scored. Like, I just don't. I'm just not interested. I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
I would do it for. I would do if you moved. I worry about the age thing. Like Jokinen's 31, but I think if you moved Kunitz for like a couple younger people, I could see like Jokinen like 3 years, $9 million.
Okay, that's fine, but the problem is he doesn't fit with this roster as currently constituted. If you had a different roster with some big young guys who played with some edge, then I could see Jokinen being a proper complementary piece. But he doesn't complement this roster as it exists today.
Okay. Tanner Glass, Joe Vitale, Taylor Pyatt, we could probably dispense with them.
Rather quickly.
Right. Lee Stempniak and Marcel Gotch.
Lee Stempniak's going to want too much money.
For what? In exchange for what?
I don't know. What did Lee Stempniak make this year?
2 point something, I think.
I don't know. Let me look it up.
And do you want Lee Stempniak on your third line? You want to put him with UC Jokinen on your third line and Brandon Sutter? Because that's what you're looking at. I don't see a place for Lee. I just don't see it.
2.5 was his cap hit last year.
It just, if you're going to pay $2.5
for
million
12 goals.
Liner,
12 goals in 73 games.
Yeah. He's like a poor man's top six. You don't want a poor man's top six on your third line. You want somebody on your third line who's going to be like, you're going to say, wow, that's a great third line. That third line really adds something to the
equation. I like that. That's a good way to put it. You don't want that's so true. I like that. Like if Stempniak and Jokinen was your third line, that's a bad second line.
Just say that's a really unfortunate second line.
Yeah. Do we should have been hockey players. I just pulled up Lee Stempniak on CapGeek. Career earnings, $17.3 million.
He made more than Gordie Howe.
Like, he's 31. He's made $17.3 million playing hockey. And he's never done anything distinguished in the NHL.
It's just unbelievable.
We really should have been NHL players.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Brian Gibbons.
He should be on the team.
I would sign him. He should be like our little Nathan Gerbe, like our little $1.1 million, $1.3 million player.
Listen, if you're a Brian Gibbons hater, get over yourself. The guy, what you want on your team is people that do things exceptionally well. And that guy's like the fastest guy in the league. And it's unbelievable. He's such a threat out there. He really is.
And and you can use that threat on the penalty kill to add an element that guys like Tanner Glass and Craig Adams can't add. I mean, I don't think it's you can't just look at penalty kill percentages. You got to sort of look at how the penalty kill can impact the game. And with a guy like with Tanner Glass and Craig Adams, you just like hurl, they just throw their body in front of shots and hope for the best. But with Gibbons, you can actually
Brian Gibbons is a no-brainer to me, especially considering you get him for cheap.
Yeah. Orpik, Niskanen, Englund.
Well, it's interesting, and my answer may surprise you. Niskanen gone, Orpik gone, Englund, I would not dismiss. I would not mind having Englund as a fourth-line wing. I thought he was very effective in that role this year. He's versatile. He can skate. He's not terrible offensively, and he's obviously physical. I wouldn't mind having him as a fourth-line winger.
League minimum, though, right?
League minimum, yeah.
So I agree that Orpik's got to go, but I mean he has been a staple of the franchise for a long time. What is your thought process on that impact? if there is any? Like, does losing him help or hurt? From a sort of like personality, culture, or leadership standpoint.
Well, his leadership didn't do us any good the last 5 years. I think that he played well in the playoffs last year, but I just think he's going to be overpriced. What is he, 35 years old?
Something like that.
Yeah, he's just going to ask for too much money. I'd rather play the young guys.
I also think that that it just looks like the Pens need a different energy, a different vibe, and you're not going to do that by getting rid of Crosby and Malkin. So, if a new voice is needed, then there's just sort of a new feeling in the room and on the team and just about the whole organization, then like that's a guy that can probably go without hurting too much. I mean, he's never struck me as a particularly likable fellow.
Yeah, I think maybe what the Penguins need is to hire an additional assistant GM just to give real talk. Like everybody can talk about what they want to do personnel wise, and then they just turn to this other assistant GM. It could be me, it could be you, just to say it's time to get rid of Brooks Orpik. Because they just might need to hear that from someone else.
Right. You know how old Chris Kunitz is? He's like a year and a half older than Brooks Orpik.
I know exactly how old Chris Kunitz is. I do.
It's unbelievable. It's just amazing. Like some of these guys, it's amazing how perception like feeds it. Because a guy that we talked about today, like Danny Heatley, you'd be like, Danny Heatley is washed up. He's just broken down. Like he stinks now. He's a year younger than Chris Kunitz.
You know how old Chris Kunitz is? He's as old as Lemieux was when he came back in 2001. Lemieux came back, and you were like, wow,
He's barely skating.
It's amazing. It's amazing he made it back. It's incredible that he got himself back into shape.
What would be hilarious is if Kunitz just like started pulling Mario this year and just stood on the goal line, like and just tried more difficult angle slap shots on every power play.
Right.
He was just like F it, I'm Chris Kunitz, I can do whatever I want, and
he's so venerable.
Yeah. I mean, because in 2001, literally all Mario did was stand on the goal line and try to score from the hardest possible angle.
I know, he was so good at it too. What a player.
Yeah. So I just mentioned Danny Heatley. Is that like, would you do 1 year flyers on any old guys like him?
Well, there was talk today in the blogosphere about Danny Heatley being willing to take a 1 year contract. I'd be lying if I said I've watched in the last 2 years in Minnesota. Haven't seen a minute of his play. But I do know how good he was in Ottawa. Hell of a goal scorer. So I'm open to it. I mean, I would defer to somebody that's actually watched the tape of Danny Heatley, but
you should tell one of your assistants.
Really, what's that?
Tell one of your assistants. Yeah.
Yeah. 1 year at a really low price for Danny Heatley, a former 50 goal scorer, stick him on Gino's line, put Neil with Sid. I would definitely be open to that, no question.
Anything else strike you about the moves in the NHL the last few days? You got Gaborik signing 7 years, $4.9 million. Callahan 6 years, $5.8, I think. Scott Hartnell traded to Columbus.
Well, I'll just give you my quick take on all of those. The more I think about Gaborik, the more I like it. Very reasonable cap hit for an explosive guy. He's 32. But, the nice thing about that move is if he retires in 3 or 4 years, there's no penalty to them. That just vanishes from their books. So less than 5 a year. I think it's like 4.8 and change.
Yeah.
That's a real good deal for a guy that scored, 14 goals in the playoffs. Callahan's a terrible deal. People never learn. You don't sign a guy who's pushing 30, who's really a power forward known for his leadership, for $6 million a year for a long term. It doesn't make any sense to me. And the third one that you mentioned was
Scott Hartnell.
Terrible trade for the Flyers. R.J. Umberger was a healthy scratch in the playoffs last year. And Hartnell is perfectly effective. And you pissed off your captain. Claude Giroux is furious about this move. You just really got to wonder what's going on there. I mean, it's not like he was an albatross on that team in terms of the salary. I just don't understand it. What do you think about that?
I think you walk a fine line when you cross Claude.
You don't cross Claude.
It's the Flyers seem to have. They're an interesting case because I look at their roster. I'm like, I would take every single one of these players on the Penguins, but then when you put them all together, they're just not that good.
Yeah,
they have a lot of those like young forwards that you'd be looking for, and maybe that's why they felt they could get rid of Hartnell. But I don't know how R.J. Umberger improves that team. Like if you're going to trade Hartnell, that's fine, but maybe that's a guy you trade to a team that's trying to win now and can give you like a younger asset. Yeah. I just don't think a 32-year-old R.J. Umberger is really going to be a difference maker for them. Think of who they've traded. Think of how good the players. Look at who the Flyers have traded in the last few years: Richards, Carter, Van Riemsdyk, and now Hartnell.
Yeah, it's not been good. We can complain all we want about Shiro's moves on the fringes and what have you, but you want to see a really botched performance by a general manager. Look at Philadelphia.
Yeah, if they kept some of those guys, the right combination of them, they would have a great team.
Jeff Carter's just a great player. He's turned into a hell of a player. Jeff
Carter and James Van Riemsdyk. That would be.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's a nice combo.
It's such a good team. All right, I got to tell you this. My friend Josh just emailed me. He played in the Mario Lemieux golf tournament today.
Yeah.
His celebrity person in his foursome was Vince Coleman. That's got to be like the biggest letdown of all time. Of all the people playing at the Mario Lemieux tournament, you're with Vince Coleman.
Yeah, that's all.
You know who Vince Coleman is, right?
No.
You don't know? Vince Coleman was a baseball player for the St. Louis Cardinals. He was a tremendous base stealer like 25 years ago. But I'm not sure why that's relevant today. He says, played at golf at the Mario outing today, showered next to James Neal, and just took a pee next to Ric Flair.
That makes up. I think peeing next to Ric Flair sort of offsets playing with Vince Coleman.
Right. We all remember famous people that we took a pee next to.
Yeah, Ric Flair is an interesting one for sure.
It's a good one. You wonder if he finished and then he went, woo!
All right, we're gonna run out of time here. We only got like 30 seconds left, so we got to wrap it up.
All right, thanks for joining us, everybody. Until next time, GTOG.